Um, this is my first time at Craft. I'm very happy to be here, but not my first time at Budapest. I think I'm the second time here. And I have a little problem. When I came to Budapest the first time, I bought something for my daughter, and I forgot what I bought. So on my way back, I guess I'll have to be very careful selecting presents for my kids. I travel. I travel a lot for business. And traveling can be fun at times. You get to see the world, if nothing else. Traveling can also be quite daunting. You get to miss the family. I know I miss my family a lot. So that's the daughter for who I need to buy a new present and remember the right one. We who travel for business often talk about how much we travel in percentage points. We say, I travel 25% or I travel 50%. We use this language in contract and offer letters when we hire new employees who are supposed to do travel for work. There's one thing, though, I learned about these numbers recently that surprised me, and you may like that too. Apparently, how much you travel, the number will depend on likely who you ask. Your employer will have an opinion. You have your own, which is likely different, probably larger than theirs. And then the person who likes spending their time with you has his or her own, which is likely also to be different than yours. So let me ask you a little puzzle. Do you think a person can travel more than 100%? While you're thinking of the answer, I'll give you an example. So this is September 2018. We have a perfectly aligned weekends. And then there's one more holiday in the US in September, which is a Labor Day, I believe, first Monday. So it gives you 19 working days that month. So if I went on a trip to, let's say, Australia and had to spend a whole month for work in Australia, my wife would tell me two things. She would say first that I was crazy for having agreed to do so, which I probably will have to agree with her on that one. And then the second, she'll tell me that I traveled 30 days out of 19 possible, which is at 157% if you do the math. Now, you're probably wondering, why am I telling you all this? I promise it'll all make sense very soon. So when I wondered about that travel calculations and different measurements, I wanted to build a little system to help myself know how much actually I do travel and how much people around me think I travel. And I did, in fact, build Travel Level. You guys, when you have time, you can go travellevel.com. It exists. You can sign up. You can play with this. And it does exactly what I wanted it to do. It keeps track of my travel. It gives me 3 different measurements, so I can see what people around me think I travel. But also, when I built it in 3 different ways. And that's what I actually came to talk here about. And that's why I'm saying it's going to make sense very soon. So I built a website, which I'll show you. I built for the Alexa skill. That's what I have the device with me, and it's on mute not to react to me saying Alexa. And I have a text interface, so I can text the Travel Level too. And then when I was building it, I was making certain decisions, and that's what I came here to talk about. My name is Pavel Veller. I don't think you need to know anything more. You can find everything else on the web. epam.com is my employer. Find about us on the web. Follow about me on the web. And if you want to, talk to me later, there'll be a BOF, I guess, right? Whatever, that short talk later, or just find me here around. So Travel Level, let me show you. And I'll be doing some live demos, so if something doesn't work, well, we'll find something else. But I'm going to get out of the PowerPoint, and that's the website, which I can log in. And it'll show me my travel stats. Just like that. And I can work with the calendar to mark certain dates as, I am traveling. That screenshot you saw from the month of September was made from here. Now, typically, the first thing I do when I know that I'm going somewhere, I text my wife, because she needs to know that I'm not going to be home for a day or 2 or a week. So now I can also, and you guys promise me not to read my text, please, but I can also text. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to ask you to watch both screens. So watch me type, because that's fun when people mistype things, and watch what happens on the site, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go and text Travel Level, and I'm going to say that I was, which is true, in London this past Tuesday. Okay? And let's see what happens. Well, Tuesday is not good. Let me say something else, because Tuesday was already marked. I gotta say that I was in Budapest yesterday, which again I was. So let's see what happens now. All right, so did you notice that one? Okay. What I also can do, I can do this. Hey, Alexa, tell Travel Level that I will be in Budapest on Thursday and Friday this week.
Traveler is usually defined as a person who changes location.
I got it, shut up. That's live demo. Alexa, tell Travel Level that I will be in Budapest on Thursday and Friday this week. No.
Got it. I have updated your travel calendar.
All right, so it worked. Not immediately, though. So that's it. So it's a fun app that has multiple interfaces to it. The interesting part was not so much in what it does, even though I have to admit I'm still using it. It's been done last year. I love it. It's about how it was built. Like as with every app or experience you guys are building, you're making decisions, right? You know, frameworks, languages, runtimes. I've made some. I'll get back to this soup of icons a little later. I'll connect all the dots. I'll explain. But first, I made a different decision. Because you see, I have interfaces. I have Alexa that I speak to through speech to text. I get text sent somewhere to Amazon and then to me. Through text, I have the same happen through Twilio. So I only have the website that has a slightly different interface, typically an API, you send some JSON. And I decided to try and do natural language API. I didn't show you, so I'll have to get out of the PowerPoint for another minute, which you shouldn't mind. Live demos are fun. And I'm going to show you what actually happens, what goes on the wire when I click on the calendar. So as I unmark certain dates, what you can see, can you guys see, is it big enough? The payload is actually an English sentence. I ask to mark that date as not traveled, right? Or if I do it again, it'll be traveled. So I basically speak to my API. That was the idea. I wanted to see what it will take. Will it make any sense? And will it make the build of the multi-model thing that understands language easier? To do that, first thing that I had to do is to work with natural language understanding. Now, we really don't do much understanding when it comes to natural language. We are yet to know how to, capture meaning, how to do common sense reasoning. None of that is really possible with technology. We barely scratch the surface. What we do today with natural language, we, I guess, kind of dump it down to two steps. It comes down to intent detection and named entity recognition. And I'll give you an example to explain both. So imagine that you are building a kind of almighty virtual assistant that can do scheduling of your meetings and can also brew you a cup of coffee. Completely two different things. So and then you speak to that assistant and you say, schedule me a meeting with Robert tomorrow at 2 p.m. So the intent of whatever you said is to schedule a meeting, right? But intent alone is not enough to fulfill the request. That assistant will need to understand who the meeting is with, what date, and what time, and maybe also what location. So these little things, we call them entities, right? So to be able to actually schedule that, I have to, A, figure out what the intent was that a meeting or a cup of coffee, and then also extract little pieces of information to then do, let's say, Outlook calendar invite or Google calendar invite. In Travel Level, there is really only two intents that I needed to support. There was marking dates on the calendar as traveled somewhere. I don't care where. I don't keep track of anything other than dates. If you decide to sign up, there'll be a little disclaimer that, don't worry, there's nothing that I'm capturing other than the dates. And by the way, you can delete your account at any time, GDPR, right? So you can mark that as travel, and you can mark them as not travel, just two intents. So I have different options to approach building that, let's say, classifier. And I always try to do the simplest thing possible first. In software, and I've been doing it long enough to know that if simple solution works, that's going to be better than any other more complex solution. So guess what worked for this one and still works really good to detect between the two intents? And that's a regular expression. It's actually that regular expression. And if you're kind of smiling and laughing, look at Microsoft. They open source their built-in entity recognizers that they have in their LUIS, which is Language Understanding Intelligence Service. It's on GitHub. About a year ago, they published it. It's a whole bunch of professionally written regular expressions. And in this case, when I looked at the sentences that I had to support, when I speak about dates of my travel that is in the future, in the past, that actually happened or will happen or is happening, I'm never going to use any negation of any sort. It's just not there. And then conversely, when I speak about something that, hey, that was canceled, or it's not happening, or I'm not going, or I wasn't, I'm going to use them. So that very clearly separates the two into that's the positive and that's the negative action. So that's one out of the two, right? So intent detection was handled by just this one line of code. The second was, though, how do I do entity extraction? So what I need to do, I need to understand dates. And I thought, well, that cannot be an unsolved problem, right? I mean, there's libraries that kind of do this. So any public NLU you look at, Google's Dialogflow, Microsoft's LUIS, IBM's Watson, they all have dates recognizers built in. NLP frameworks, NLTK, Spacey, Stanford NLP, they all have some sort of date recognition built in. But what I quickly realized, there are certain expressions that I wanted travel level to support that they don't understand, not to my liking at least. I'll give you two examples. First, so look at that sentence. I will be in Stockholm on October 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. How many dates you see? I bet it's 3. Now, all of those libraries that I tried, and again, it was last year that I tried last, maybe like in the fall, so maybe they got a little better at it, but I think they didn't, and I'll explain why. But they'll see one date, and then they'll see 2 ordinal numbers. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted the framework to give me 3 dates. I'll give you another one. So that's another example. Oh, yeah, sorry. The problem is in connecting, right, the month of October that was clearly attached to the first date, connecting it to the 2 other dates, which not only requires you to make the connection, but it requires to understand that the other dates are spoken or typed in context of a phrase that is about dates. It's a little too much to what we can do today. We're just looking at text programmatically. So they don't. Another example. Similar idea. I was in SFO, which is San Francisco Airport. And again, we who travel for business often talk about locations in terms of airport codes. It just so happened. So I was in San Francisco, and this is Thursday today. It's a great example to give you. If I told you I was in San Francisco last Tuesday, you would probably ask me, which Tuesday do you mean? Last Tuesday this week or last Tuesday last week? And at least in US English, if I said last Tuesday and you didn't have a chance to ask me which one and had to assume, the safest assumption is last week Tuesday. That's why this past is this kind of a very clear disambiguation. I'm talking about this past Tuesday, which was this week. But then this past is the present and the past tense right together. And the same problem with, is it about both days of the week or just the first one? Those frameworks will give me Tuesday from last week, Wednesday from this week, or Tuesday from this week and Wednesday from next week, all kinds of different dates. I just need the date. I need like, what is it, May 7th? Or is it May 14th? And none of it worked. So now I'm an engineer presented with the problem. I have point A and I have point B. And there's a bike route between the two. And I have like 5 bikes. None of them, though, I like. It's either not fast enough, not comfortable enough, wheels are not round enough, or the point B they're going to get me to is not the point B I need to get to. So what we do as engineers when we're presented with that problem, we create our own bike. We kind of do this all the time, every day, don't we? So I built my own bike, too. That bike is called Orolo, and it's on GitHub. And it's a small little library that actually helps me do this. It helps me make the assumptions that the other frameworks decided not to make, which I gotta give it to them. It's probably the right thing to do. You guys all do software, or like I imagine, in one role or the other, right? You write code, you solve technical problems or non-technical problems with technology. And if you've done it long enough, then you know that making assumptions that you don't validate, it's likely one of the big sources of problems that will only, be recognized by you or your team or whoever you build the software for later. So making assumptions can be dangerous, and those general purpose frameworks that understand dates decide not to make them. But Aurora decides to make them, but I am very clear about why I'm making that choice. It's a very aggressive parser. I'm not going to tell you how it works. It's all on the GitHub. If you like it, let me know. You can use it. It's all open source. It's just a fun little thing. But more importantly, I spent more time on that than on anything else that built around it that you guys saw. So you saw the Alexa skill, you saw the text interface, you saw the website. It was nice, design. I didn't design. Somebody helped me with that. But everything else was less effort than this little thing. This little thing was more fun, arguably. But still, the point is, doing entity recognition may seem like an easy thing, but when you start doing it, and to the extent that you would like to be able to do it, may not be as easy as it seems. And also, for natural language to actually become, I've heard people say that give it a couple years and the systems will start talking to each other in English. We will not have to really do all these complex, tedious V1, V2, V3 JSON integrations. And yet, JSON or YAML or whatever binary format you guys are using has certain characteristics in it that makes it very applicable for the problem. With natural language, there'll be, at least I see two problems. One is, like I showed you, an example of how not easy simple entity recognition can be, and I only can imagine other types of entities I'll need to sometime extract. But more importantly, my API now, it's a happy path. It's a one-way path, right? I give it an English sentence, it understands dates. What does it give me back? How does it communicate errors? If it starts speaking back to me in English, then I have to do natural language understanding on the consumer part as well, which is like a whole different ballgame then, right? So it's a lot easier. I would prefer error codes and JSON formats and payloads. So I guess what I'm trying to tell you, I think half of my experiment was, all right, I had lots of fun. I built a little open source library. It was cool. It was a good spend of my time. But I don't think that I'll see in any time soon systems talking to each other. We'll need to get to a whole other level of being able to understand language for that to be not only possible, but to be practical to use. But there was another aspect. So I promise you to connect all those icon dots and talk about the serverless components, because one aspect of me building that was playing with the language. The other one was to attempt, and again, it was done not yesterday. I guess serverless by now is a little more common thing, but still, attempt to do everything with 0 servers whatsoever. So there's nothing I can SSH into, period. I just don't know. I'm sure they exist. It's all running on servers at the end of the day. I just don't know where they are, what kind they are. And I built a system that apparently has all the components of quite a mature, complex app. So what I want to do, I want to break down all of this into pieces that support travel level and walk you through a couple patterns and basically what you can do today with, in this case, AWS serverless. So let's start by a misnomer, I guess, a serverless web server. Because there's got to be a web server that responds to your travellevel.com and serves you content. So my server looks like this. It's when you type up the URL, the domain CNAME record points at CloudFront distribution, which is a CDN. It can do HTTP to HTTPS, good. It can do SSL termination for me, great. Now it needs an origin to fetch content from. The origin, in my case, is an S3 bucket. Because the way I built the front end is a statically built React app. I could pre-render, like with Gatsby or something, but for that little thing I didn't, so it's just an index HTML with bundled JavaScripts and CSSs and images around it, and it's all static assets. So it's basically rendered at build time. And if I wanted to pre-render server-side to have HTML for search engines and whatnot, I would do that with Gatsby, which, again, you can do it today. I see this pattern more and more in the applications we built for our clients, which means my deployment is as simple as AWS S3 sync, right? I run npm run build, and then I just push it out. And that's it. That's deployed web part. Now, that alone would be great, but sometimes you need a little dynamic. When I launched Travel Level, it had a different name. It was on a different domain. And then I wanted to rename it because the first name, I had problems with Alexa skill understanding how do you talk to that thing? And even now, I said travel level, I said traveler. It's kind of hard to find one. But then I had to redirect from the old domain to the new domain. Easy to do for the bare domain, like travellevel.com itself without ./. That you can do at my DNS provider. But what I couldn't do with HTTPS, because that requires them to terminate SSL, right, understand the request, and send it somewhere else. But CloudFront today, or not today, like it's been a year or two, they support Lambda, that they run at the edge. They give you 4 events. So request coming in, doesn't matter whether it's in cache or not, they can call Lambda. Then if the object is not in cache, they'll call origin, they'll call your Lambda 2, and then on the way back the same event. So I have one little piece of code running for that other CloudFront distribution. I'll show. That's exactly like straight up from that Lambda function. Then all it does is, if a request comes in, it takes that, understands the URI that you're looking after, and sends you back to travel level domain, just like this. It only does it once, and it caches the response, and will send the cached response back. I can build more dynamic functions like that for my serverless web server if serving content is just not enough. So that's an option. Next was authentication. And you guys didn't maybe realize, but I have 3 points. So you saw me sign in on the web. You don't know, but Alexa skill is also linked because it needs to know that I'm talking to it, not you. Because if you try, well, right now it will be my Alexa. Your Alexa at home will be connected to your account. And then I also text, right? So in the middle of all that is AWS Cognito. I hope you heard of this. If not, that's a serverless managed user management authentication service. For the web, I used AWS Amplify. If any one of you guys work with AWS and you haven't looked at Amplify, please do. It's a very actively developed project. I've been through it. I've been with it for about a year. Went from 0.3 to 1 dot something. So it's a great library. But I just do send. I don't do hosted. I do my own form. So I send my login password. Alexa does OAuth. That's how Alexa supports account linking. And the text goes a different route. So when I text it, it goes through Twilio, arrives at my Lambda. My Lambda has permission to go fetch users from the user directory. It'll go find that person with the phone number that you texted from, and then that's going to be your authentication. All of that is just done through Cognito. Different ways of finding who the user is and authenticating you, allowing you to do things. Next was APIs. Kind of simple. I have a few APIs. They all, of course, run in Lambda. Now, to get from the browser to the Lambda function, you need an API gateway. And then to get a domain name for your API gateway, you get a CloudFront distribution. It's a pass-through. That's how you connect domain names to API gateway, which in this case means that the way I deploy my APIs, very similar to how I deploy my web, is in one line. And I'm using serverless framework. It's a serverless.com. There are other ways to deploy your functions to AWS or other clouds for that matter, but I like what serverless does. It's a YAML file, and then they do CloudFormation for you for Amazon, and they deploy it. So very simple. Database is even simpler. I mean, there are a couple options for serverless now with Amazon. There is DocumentDB, which is a new MongoDB compliant offering that they have. But I use Dynamo. I write to it from Lambda. I also listen to changes, because when I did the text, when I talked to Alexa and you saw the web updates, clearly there's real-time WebSocket connection, which I'll get to next. So I also have another Lambda listening to updates. And now we're getting to the most interesting part, I guess, because when I wanted to build it, it was kind of, again, that's another misnomer. So serverless web server, just fun thing to say. Serverless WebSockets, though, WebSockets require persistent connection. So how do you do it? So a year ago, well, last year, until December, there was only one way, which is how it works right now in Travel Level. And I'll explain it for you. So remember how the web server is not really a server, just a cloud front. And I can't have a persistent connection to CDN, and it would be of no use anyway. So that's not how it works. Now let's look at the API story. So I have Lambda with a gateway that I can call, that calls my database, that calls my observer function. Now I made an update by talking to Alexa. Update arrived to DynamoDB. DynamoDB called my Lambda like a trigger. Hey, I have an update. Now that Lambda function on there needs to somehow send it back to my browser. So the way I do it, and the way you can do it too, I take that update and I send it down to IoT Hub topic. So AWS IoT Hub supports kind of messaging style communication. That's what they have to do. So I create topics on demand. Topics are named using email of that user, because that I consider that a unique identifier. And then the browser can connect to the topic, because topic will keep that persistent connection, because Amazon supports MQTT over WebSockets. That's how it works in travel level. You now have a different pattern with AWS. As of December last year, they support WebSockets on API Gateway. I'll explain. So what I could have done, and what I would probably have done if I was doing it now, you can deploy a Lambda function with not HTTP, but WebSockets API Gateway, let's say, configuration. It'll give you multiple functions for different WebSockets events. You can connect to the gateway, which will fire your $connect Lambda function. You will have the connection ID, which you'll need to store somewhere, because Lambda fires and then it goes. The connection stays between the browser and the gateway, and you keep track of connection ID in relation to whoever that person is. And the next thing that happens, when the notifier function has an update to push, it can call a specific URL on the gateway. So they'll give you, so that API will have a URL, right? Like any other API has a URL. And on that URL, there's a special add connections with the connection ID, which will push that update back to the browser. So that wasn't available 5 months ago, 6 months ago, now it is. So that's a second pattern for fully serverless WebSockets. And if you think about this, so I have a web server, I have authentication and user directory, I have a database, I have a set of APIs, and I even have a real-time feedback loop with my client. Isn't that kind of all you need to build a decent, complex app? And I never needed a server, and more importantly, my blog also runs the same way. My blog is statically pushed and deployed through CloudFront and S3. My AWS bill has yet to reach $1 per month. Maybe, if many of you start using travel level, I start feeling it. But until right now, it's absolutely easy to go, easy to start, easy to build, and absolutely cheap to play with and build real thing with. So just to repeat, my infrastructure exposure in maintaining, supporting, deploying is 3 lines of code, no kidding. I do deploy my API with 1 line, I deploy my web with one line, and I also clean the cache on CDN just in case with 1 line. And the takeaways for me, and I guess takeaways for you, from that experiment, the second part, not the natural language part, is that I personally, I like serverless. There's no reason for me not to, and I think that you should too. You can take all those patterns, and I'm sure they're very similar in other cloud providers, which I'm going to do next. Not right now. I only have 10 minutes, which I'm going to give back to you guys. But the next thing in travel levels life will be doing the same in the other 2 big clouds, Azure and GCP. We'll see how it goes. And if I like it, if I apply to speak about it next year, maybe you'll come and hear me talk about this next year. But right now, thank you.
Thank you, Pavel. I was always a little afraid of going into the serverless thing, but you showed me that it's way easier than I thought.
Thank you.
You guys, hit up slido.com and type in your questions for Pavel, because we have still a few minutes left.
I like the first question. It's been designed with multilingual support. I haven't built another language for it. It comes down, if you look, I guess the easiest will be to show you the code, but if you look, what it does is, it looks for I guess I call them tokens, that may potentially compute to represent a date, like a month, a number, a day of the week, or something, right? And then I take the tokens all together and I compute them into a set of dates. I try to understand the ends and this like different ways. There's some clever things that I'm trying to do to compute different dates, but you can supply a different set of tokens for a different language. There may be a language where dates are represented completely different, which I just don't know. I only speak Russian, English, and I used to speak German. In those three languages can totally fit the model that I built. I'm yet to build them though. So if anybody's interested, please, by the way, it's open source, you can build it too. But it may be coming. Now, to the second comment, in a way, so depending on what part, natural language API was, I just wanted to try. I didn't know what it would be. It's like, when you have time to experiment, why don't spend time to experiment? I wanted to learn what it would be. So I did not decide it because it was a technical decision, the easiest decision. I just wanted to try what it would be. Everything else though, the whole serverless thing, no. I think if I were building it for real, that's how I would build it. This is very similar to how I architected a few solutions we built for our clients recently. So that's not over-engineering, not in my book. The API with natural language, yeah, I get it. That was just a fun experiment.
Great. Now I have a question for you, Pavel.
Yeah.
With all this travel, how do you handle jet lag?
It's not that much, though. If you see, actually, that was the thing I wanted to measure. It's not that much. I thought I travel more than I actually do. But melatonin helps.
Okay, I see. Maybe I should try it sometime. Okay, thank you, Pavel. If anyone has questions for Pavel, he's going to be available at the BOF session at the sponsor booth at around 6:10 p.m. today. Pavel, I have a gift for you on behalf of the organizers. Here it is.
All right, thank you.
You can show it to the audience, maybe.
Yeah, that's a really good, I guess, portrait of me, which is really awesome. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, and great talk. Everyone, give it up for Pavel Veller.